The Delta Flyer Jr. is following a space rock. The Doc's interested in taking samples and poking the biological matter he finds, though Kim and Seven are swiftly tiring of the whole outing. Somebody else is unimpressed too, at least I assume that's why they're pooping at us. A call from them clears up the mystery. They're not bothered about us vandalizing asteroids, but rather the fact that we're harboring a photonic life form. They refer to him as a suspected insurgent, so maybe their holograms got tired of being treated like shit and had a bit of an uprising. Good for them. Kim tries calling Voyager for help until a kaboom knocks out our phone. The attackers grab the Delta Flyer Jr. in a tractor beam and fire something else at it too. Whatever it is, it's buggering up the Doc's program. Based on their apparent dislike of holograms, we'll assume that's deliberate. The Doc pleads for Seven to help as some guests teleport into the cockpit with Kim. They all have guns, and two of them are even managing to point them in the right direction. Either that, or the pair on the left have something against the person behind the camera. They're here for the Doc, but Seven says the science beam killed him. She says this with somewhat more emotion than normal, and has started using hand gestures, like what the Doc does. I guess we're having another of the obligatory sci-fi body swap episodes then. One of the guests thinks the biomatter in the space rock we were looking at could be used to make weapons, and they're not convinced by Seven Doc saying their mobile emitter is a portable regeneration device either. Best take everybody to lockup while we sort all this out. Kim's mourning the loss of the Doc while there, his observational skills going some way to explaining why he's still an ensign. Seven Doc reveals the truth, compliments Seven's body, then starts sniffing Kim. I dread to think what sort of fanfic this scene has inspired on the internet. Speaking of sex things, Tuvok's got an unspecified illness that he doesn't want to talk about with Paris. It's his shagger season from the looks of things, the period during which a Vulcan's biology makes them cast off their logic to do some heavy fucking, or get their jaw broken if they're just an ensign. One option for those without access to a partner is to meditate the horny away, but Tuvok's asking for medication, so it must not be going well. Bit of a problem for Paris, as he can't hand out drugs without knowing what they're for, and Vulcans don't like talking about their sexy times. Faced with little alternative, Tuvok is honest. Paris, on the other hand, has the good grace not to be, telling Tuvok that he'll bullshit Janeway about what's affecting him. To the alien ship, where Seven Doc has been brought to the Delta Flyer Jr. for a bit of interrogation. We'll assume the guy asking questions is important then and staple a name to the face. Our interrogator will now be known as... Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow, submitted by Lieutenant Charles June. It's my own fault for creating the wheel, I suppose. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow, who I suspect is going to be called Jerry in name-heavy segments, thinks the Delta Flyer Jr. is very well equipped for the average smuggling ship. He's right, too. We generally have Neelix use one of the old Type 6 shuttles for his smuggling. Seven Doc balks at the idea of them being smugglers, which is a bit rich when you consider all the times we've done it. We're just explorers, you see, and this is an exploration ship. Jerry's suspicious and wants to know more about our equipment, causing Seven Doc to oblige by proving it's just a food replicator and sample some to show it's not poisoned. Cheesecake becomes banquet, becomes getting wankered on synthahol. I wonder how Jerry would feel if he knew it was all made from shit. Seven Doc is waxing lyrical about the Doc, possibly to convince Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow that killing holograms is wrong, but mostly for self-gratification. It works in part, at least, and they manage to convince Jerry to give the mobile emitter back by saying it's necessary for their well-being. Kim's alarmed to learn that Seven Doc was getting shit-faced with their captors, but revealing the mobile emitter goes some way to validating their approach. Seven is even more upset at events, largely because she's the one who's having to deal with what he's just ingested using her body. Unsurprising, then, that she's not keen on him taking residence again, but the alternative is apparently him being discovered. I don't know why we can't just turn off the emitter, but let's ignore that for now. Besides, he needs to be in control of Seven, as part of getting the emitter back was agreeing to help treat some patients. And while the Doc's driving, Seven can be observing their systems to see if she can find a way of getting a signal to Voyager. She reluctantly agrees, and off they go. The medical bay currently has a few patients, all suffering from the effects of a biological agent. A chat with the crew member showing Seven Doc around, a medic of sorts, gives us some backstory. She had a photonic who tended her brother and her as children, and can't understand why he joined this rebellion. This photonic pursued his own interests, and she refers to him as part of her family, though I wonder if that latter point was his choice. 7-Doc treats the patients, but won't know if it's working till tomorrow. They also make a point of noting that the knowledge to treat these patients came from Voyager's hologram. Here's hoping their treatment goes better than Tuvok's. The medication isn't working and he's approaching peak horny. More drugs would be dangerous, but Paris does have an idea. He's a dab hand at the old holodeck game, and it's not cheating if it's a hologram of his wife, right? Perhaps not fancying the alternative of do a fight, Tuvok agrees and goes for some simulated candlelit cave coitus. It'd be a terrible time for some of those hologram haters to turn up and attack, so naturally, that's what happens. Assurances that we're peaceful are ignored and they start pooping that anti-hologram beam at us. What's good for the pooper is good for the poopy, and Janeway kabooms their weapons. They're a bit more talkative without guns and willing to find a diplomatic solution, though Janeway threatening to kill them all may have played a part in that. We agree to shut down our holodecks while in their space and be escorted through. After all, there's nothing important happening in them right now. Tuvok's not the only one dealing with an acute case of cerulean spheres. While 7-Doc is treating patients, Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow calls them to the bridge. The good news is this means we get to watch him using a command console. The bad news is that he makes a pass at 7-Doc and mashes his face into theirs. They flee, and the medic from earlier is upset to hear of 7-Doc's ordeal, but that may be more to do with her fancying Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow herself. And to make the awkwardness complete, her attempting to help with neck pain causes 7-Doc to get a bit horny too. Jesus Christ, this whole situation's worse than Riser, and they're literally known as the fuck planet. 7-Doc's called back to the brig by Kim feigning illness, which is probably just as well as the Doc, while driving 7-Doc, was going to tell that medic who he really was. 7's obviously a bit pissed at how things have gone, not just because the Doc nearly blew the whole thing, but also that kiss from Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow, and the Doc getting his horn on while receiving a massage in her body. The ensuing argument about the value of indulgence is stopped by Kim, who just wants to get the fuck out of Dodge. And we might have an option for that now, as 7-Doc saw Jerry's password while they were on the bridge. Getting those to Voyager will let them take control and teleport everybody away. Of course, for that to work, we have to tell Voyager the codes, and where we are, for that matter. We can do that from the Delta Flyer Junior, apparently, which is pretty odd when you remember that the phone got knocked out when we were taken prisoner, but let's ignore that for now. Either way, it's time for some more subterfuge. 7-Doc wants to speak privately with Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow, and that means using the Delta Flyer Junior, because reasons. We'll assume he doesn't have a ready room or meeting room, and using his quarters would be a bit weird under the circumstances. It's a bit odd that there's nowhere else free on his ship, especially when we were told earlier that they've lost 30% of the crew, but maybe they were packed in like space sardines before the deaths. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow apologizes for his behavior, and 7-Doc downplays the whole thing before turning on the Doc's idea of charm. That means champagne, dimmed lights, music, and dancing. In time, perhaps that could have worked. Unfortunately, Jerry is called away, so before he can leave, 7-Doc just sticks a needle in the bastard. Over on Voyager, Tuvok's returned to duty, possibly as an attempt to distract himself. Janeway appreciates the effort while also telling him that he can do all the hollow-fucking he wants as soon as we're away from here, as she's noticed the last time he was this ill was about 7 years ago, the cycle for Vulcan Shagger seasons. Nobody's told Neelix, though, and he brings soup for Tuvok's flu. Not exactly a traditional cure for his genuine condition, but I suppose it would be difficult to maintain an erection with food poisoning. A call from 7-Doc diffuses the awkwardness. Janeway's given a location and those passwords, which will be very useful if we can find a subtle and diplomatic way of losing our escort ship. To that end, Janeway subtly and diplomatically poops some yellow at the buggers, and we leg it. Maybe they'll repair the damage, maybe we just murdered some people. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow's been moved to their medical facilities. The medic that the Doc fancies thinks him not handling his booze is a piss-poor excuse, and wakes him. That's not a great result for 7-Doc, but at least Voyager's turned up. Jerry wants 7-Doc on the bridge rather than locked up, which feels like a bloody awful plan to me, but it's his ship, I guess. Janeway calls and says she doesn't want to fight, her bloodlust perhaps having been sated by the previous maybe murders. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow explains why he's holding our people, so Janeway ignores him and uses those command codes. Attempts to turn off their shields are starting to work until they plug them straight into their generator. Attacking will cause the ship to explode and kill everybody aboard. A tractor beam fails too, so Janeway tries calling Seven's brainial implant directly to enlist some insider help. That'll be easier if there are two of them, so Seven Doc squirts the doc back into his emitter as Seven knocks that guard on his ass and grabs a gun. She gives it to the doc while she fiddles with the console, which proves to be a terrible choice when he's immediately disarmed. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow poops at the console next to Seven, which is a bit silly when you consider it's his ship. It's academic anyway, as she's already started to bugger their shields, and warns him that fiddling with it could cause a kaboom. He fiddles anyway and gets a kaboom in the face for his troubles. Just as well then that there's a doctor present. Janeway calls and tells Seven and the doc, and presumably Kim, who we've all forgotten about by now, that she'll be teleporting them back. That's unusually formal for a hostage rescue, but it does give the doc an opportunity to tell her not to so he can treat his patient. The medic doesn't believe his intent at first, but Jerry's going to cark it if he doesn't operate, so she's left with little choice. Jerry Chicka Gibbet Meow is healed, and it's time for a chat. That's more than a little awkward now that they know the doc was the one in control of Seven Doc earlier, what with all the horny that was flying about. Still, having one of those hated photonics save a member of their crew has made them all inclined to let us go, and perhaps think twice before simply murdering holograms in the future. At least until they find out about all of their mates that Janeway might have killed earlier. Oh well. Tuvok's back to normal now too, apparently having exorcised his semen demon on the holodeck. And Seven's taken the doc's words to heart, experimenting with some indulgences. Giving him the steering wheel isn't on offer, but she is willing to describe the experience to him, and we leave them to explore the culinary world as we fly away. When the hook of this episode was first revealed, essentially a modified body swap story, it made me think of an episode of Red Dwarf that follows a similar premise. I'm not quite sure why, as the idea has been overused to the point of absurdity in a number of shows, but it's not the first time I've linked an event on Voyager with Red Dwarf, so maybe I've already formed the subconscious connection. That connection was unexpectedly prescient, as both stories also involve the concept of a hologram indulging in sensation to the point of abuse when given physical form. This isn't the first time that the doc's experienced sensations, of course, as he's felt pain at least twice by my count, and you'd suspect that there was something pleasurable involved back when he gave himself a holographic wangus. It's a matter of scale, though, and to those without a biological component, something as basic as learning how it feels to have a pulse must be fascinating. The point of Seven being unwilling to experience sensation is one worth exploring too. We know she's interested in learning, but this all skims a bit too close to emotion for her liking, so an aversion is entirely reasonable. If we're willing to stretch things, her having a staple food and sticking to it could also be another nod to neurodivergence. We should take a moment to give praise to Jeri Ryan. Her version of the doc is convincing, the face overly animated, the arms wildly gesticulating. I've often felt like a lot of body swap episodes are partly an excuse to let an actor show their range, so it's pleasing to see someone who took the assignment seriously. While we're complimenting, there was a line delivered by Seven Doc that I appreciated. The doc is in the driving seat when we hear the words, "I may become the first prisoner of war to be decorated by his captors." It's a small thing, but a good catch by the writers, so we'll give some points. The show does have a couple of minor problems. Seven Doc uttering the line, "I have to watch my figure," is indicative of aesthetic ideals that should be long since outdated by the 24th century, in the same way that Picard's lack of hair was dismissed as something that they just wouldn't care about by that point. There's also perhaps one of the worst delivered lines to date with, "It's a photonic," by the medic. The doc has just appeared magically in front of them, a sworn nemesis responsible for killing a third of their crew. This is a line that's supposed to be charged with shock, surprise, fear and hatred, instead being delivered with all the gravitas of somebody describing cornflakes. I don't often piss on the performances in these segments, and the rest of her work for the episode is perfectly serviceable, but the tonal mismatch here was jarring, to say the least. Those aren't enough to undermine the rest of what's on offer, though. It's probably not a top 10 candidate, but it is solid, and the work Jerry Ryan puts into making this believable elevates a well-worn trope into something enjoyable. End of episode.
Us? What the fuck do they want to talk to us for?
I don't know, but I don't like it. Hold on, here they come.
You must be the dogs.
Well, I can see why they wanted you for Starfleet intelligence. Only the cream of the crop for Section 31, eh?
How did they know we're from Section 31?
Like I told you, sir, they're perfect candidates. The peak of observational skills.
That must be how they're able to see past our special distraction badges. The ones we wear to make people think we're not in Starfleet.
Wow. That explanation managed to be even worse than everything I've imagined.
I'm Commander Feldray, and this is Admiral Christopher Davis.
We're here about a certain fatality.
Look, we don't know anything about that.
That's not what we've heard.
In fact, we think you were responsible.
Oh shit.
And that's why we want to offer you a job.
Wait, what?